Micro front ends in Vue. It's actually a lot easier than you think. Hi, I'm Jack Herrington, a principal full stack software engineer. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to create micro front ends in Vue 3, how to share state with them through the Vuex store, how to route to them through the Vue router, how to asynchronously load them, and how to put them on a React page so you can have Vue experiences in your React app. It's fun stuff. Let's get right into it. So I'm starting off in this empty directory, and in here I'm going to create a package.json, which is basically just a yarn workspaces. And what I'm going to use it for initially is just to run a bunch of apps simultaneously. It's not actually going to do any package to package linking. What we're going to do is mostly runtime sharing through a mechanism called module federation that's built into Webpack 5. So what this is looking for is a directory called packages. So I'm going to go ahead and create that directory now, and then change into that directory. And within that directory, I am going to use a command that I created called mpx create mf app. And what it does is it allows you to create really simple module federation apps. I'm going to create two of them. One's be called host, and it's going to be a type of application on port 8080. And then I'll scroll down here to Vue 3, pick JavaScript, and also that I want Tailwind. And then I'm going to create another one called remote. And we're going to share components between the remote app and that host app. It's going to be an application again. I'm going to put it on 8081 this time. And it's also going to be a Vue 3 app in JavaScript with Tailwind. So we'll share Tailwind between the two of them. And then I'm going to go back up to the root directory. I'll show you over here. We have these two packages now. All right, so the next thing I want to do up here is do yarn, and that's going to go and load the dependencies for both of these apps. And once that's done, I can do yarn start, and that'll start them both up. Okay, so both of these apps are started. On 8080, we can see that we have our host app. And on 8081, we can see that we have a remote app. Now, this create MF app, it creates these very, very simple booter applications. They just have the framework that you chose, a very simple app. They don't have anything like ESLint or Jest. They're really just to give you a chance to play with module federation and see how it works in this context. So let's do that. Let's go and have the remote app create a header that it's going to share with that host app. And kind of assume that we have basically two different groups working on two different applications here. So the first group is this remote app, and they're going to want to go and create that header. So let's go over and take a look into our remote app, and we can see that we have our source over here. We've got app.vue. It's exactly the template that we see over in here. And what we want to do is we want to create that header.vue. And into that, I'm just going to build a very simple header. So let's go and import that over in our app. So we'll import the header from that local file. And then I'll expose it to my template. And then I'll include that in my template. And there we go. Nice little header. And of course, the host page team was like, hey, we like your header. So can we go use that? I'm like, heck yeah, you don't want to go re-implement that. That's an amazing header. It took a lot of time to build. So what you're going to do in the remote app, you're going to go over to the Webpack config. And this is a very standard Webpack config. We have a public path in there. This could be auto if you want that. We just got a bunch of extensions that automatically resolve. We got a dev server on 8081 with a history fallback. So if you want to do routing, it all works. It's got the basic rules. There's nothing at all interesting about this. Got a Vue loader, got the Babel loader that's going to go into your JavaScript and TypeScript. And it's got the style loader that's going to manage the CSS, and in particular, in this case, Tailwind. And then there's the plugins. We got the Vue loader plugin, also, again, very standard, and the HTML Webpack plugin. And that's going to go and inject the script tag into our source. No problem there. But the weird thing is this module federation plugin, which comes in as part of the standard Webpack 5 distribution nowadays. And what this allows you to do is take any module that you have, which includes components in your application, and expose it for other apps to use. Or when you specify a remote, you can actually say, I want to go and use components that are shared by other apps and bring them into this app. So obviously in this case, we want to expose that header. So I'm going to add a new key in this object and give it the name header and point it at that source header view file that we created. So now in order to get that change done, I need to restart that server. So I'm going to restart both of those. And we can see that our app is still running just fine, but it's also actually done something new. It's gone and created a new file in here called remote entry. And you can name this whatever you want by specifying this file name. But what that is a manifest of all of the items that are exposed in the Webpack config. So in our case, that's just that header. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that URL and go back to the remote, and I'm going to go into this host app and I'm going to go paste it into the Webpack config of the host app so that it can consume those modules. So let me get rid of all these and then go over into our host. And again, I'm going to go in that Webpack config. It's exactly the same as the other one, except for a different name, right? The name here is host as opposed to remote on the other side. Now we want to go and add that remote as a remote. So add on here remote, and I'll say remote at, and then give it that URL. And the reason it's remote here is because if I look over in the Webpack config over here, the name is remote. So this name and this one need to match, but you can actually use any name you want here when it comes to this remote. This is what you're going to use in your import statements. All right, so again, we got to go and reboot our app because we got to go reload that Webpack config. But in the meantime, we can go back over here to our app.view and see that this is exactly the same as the other one, except that it's got a different name. And we're going to do script here. Now I'm going to import that header again because we want to use it. But in this case, instead of importing it from a local file, I'm going to import it from remote. And I'm going to use the same name as I exposed it in the other application, and that's, in this case, header. So I'm going to add that to my list of components. And then up in our app, I'm going to make a few changes here so we can actually kind of see a visual difference between these two apps. So I'll call this host and make it, kind of, let's see, give it a little margin on that top, make it a big piece of text, and make it bold. So I can kind of visually differentiate this between the host and the remote. And then I'm going to bring in that header. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, it's already there. How cool is that? So let's go over and inspect and see that over in the network panel, we are getting our remote entry file from the other app, and then we're importing that source header view, and that's what is actually giving us our implementation. Now, one of the really cool things that Webpack 5 does is actually manages all of the shared dependencies between those two. Since I have a Vue application and I'm importing some Vue code that also depends on Vue, Webpack 5 is really smart, and it says, okay, you already have Vue from this host, so I'm actually not going to go and get that. But in the case of our React application that we're going to build later, when I bring in my Vue app, it's actually going to go and also bring in Vue as well, unbeknownst to the React app, in order to make that run. And it's Webpack 5 that does all of that arbitration for us. So it's very nice. Okay, but the first question that comes up when it comes to Micro-FEs is, how do I share some state between this host page and this header? So let's go and bring in a Vuex store. And what we're going to do is bring it into the host app. So I'm going to go into packages, host, and then I'm going to do yarn add and then Vuex. And I'm going to give it the @4 because this is Vue 3 and there's all that kind of kerfuffle around the versions. Next thing I need to do is go over into our bootloader. So this is where we create the app. So we're going to go and create a store here. So the first thing we need to do is bring in create store from Vuex. And then we need to create a store. Now I'm just going to use the standard kind of count one, and we're going to have an add one, just kind of increments that count. You can create any kind of state you want and share it along. It's, there's no limitations around this. And then I'm going to go and with that store, I'm going to use that store. And that's going to give us this .store in all of our components. So let's go back over here to our app.view. And then I'm going to upgrade my component so that we have a computed value for the count. It's going to give us our this.store.state.count. And then it's going to have an add1 method, which is going to commit that add1 on that store. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is figure out if we actually are getting that data. So let's just put out the count out there. And now I'm going to rerun our apps. Let's go over to our host, and we can see that we have count 1. Awesome. So let's go and add a count button that's just going to go and increase that count by doing that add1 method. And perfect. Great. Okay, awesome. So now we have a functioning Vuex store, and the question becomes, how can we then consume that in the header? And it turns out we just consume that just the way we normally would, because it's just exposed through the standard view mechanisms. So I'm going to go and take this computed, and then I'm going to go over to our remote and down into header. And again, I'm going to do the script with JavaScript. I'll just paste in that computed. And then over here on that header, I'm going to do div, put in that count. And then after that font bold, we'll just make it flex grow. So it's going to put it over on the other side of the header. And away we go. And Bob's your uncle, boom, 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 done. Awesome. So this is actually just showing you that this is just standard view code. And when you bring in one of these components, it's as if you had it in a local file, you just happen to have it in the other app. But there's also a problem, right? Because remote at this point doesn't have a store. So if I refresh, I'm going to see, boom, blows up. And why is that? Well, because we're trying to dereference that state, and that state's not there, right? There's no store. So we need to defensively program in this case. And I'll just say, question mark dot, and then give it a default value. And that'll go and fix the problem, because now if store is null, we don't dereference it. And then, so we don't fall into this trap. And question mark dot's really easy to make that happen. But this is really important. When it comes to Micro-FEs, you want to program defensively. You don't necessarily know that your host is going to provide everything you need. And so you want to make sure that if it's not there, then you don't blow up like I just did here. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is show routing. So again, I'm going to go into packages host, and I'm going to add the view router, again, at 4, because we have the whole thing between view 3 and view 2. And then we go back up a directory, and again, yarn start. And then let's go over to our host app. And so the first thing we need is some sort of routes. So I'm going to create a home view, which is going to be our home page route. Going to have a template, div, homepage route, right? Okay, cool. And then I'm going to go back over into our bootloader, and we're going to start building out our routes. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring in our view router, and then I'm going to bring in home from that local file. Then I'm going to set up some routes. So in this case, slash is going to go to home. Crazy. And then finally, with this view router, I'm going to create a router, and it's going to have a history with that hash history, and then it's going to have those routes. So I'm going to use that router down here. And then the last thing I need to do is go over to our app.view, which is effectively our layout, I guess, and then add in the router view. So let's take a look. Let's go over to our app. Host, yeah, that's a good one. And now we can see that we have the homepage route. Awesome, cool. And what I want to do is I want to go and add another route, but I want to bring it in from remote. I want to have it be an external dependency, a runtime dependency. So I'm going to go close out host here, and then over in remote, I'm going to add a new route. Let me copy and paste that home one. And let's see, we'll call this one the about route, about.view. Paste that in there. We got the about page route. Nice. Now, of course, we need to expose that. So let's go over to our Webpack config and then add a new line for exposes. And in this case, I'm going to expose about.view. All right, easy peasy. So let's go and again restart. There's so much restarting. But that's just because we need to import the new Webpack config. And let's see. So over here in our host, we need to go to app.view. We need to go to the bootloader and then come up here, and we need to import that about route from remote about. And I'm going to go and add a path for that. Let's see. So what do we want? We want probably /about, I'm guessing. Let's try that. /about and point it at about. And let's see how we go. All right. And the next thing we want to do is import that about from remote about. And then down here, we want to go and assign that to a new route. So I'm guessing we're going to want something along the lines of /about, pointing at the component about. All right, let's try this out. So we got our homepage route here. If I just manually type in /about, hey, coolio, nice. Okay, and then the last thing we want to do is, I guess, add into the header, right? You want to be able to navigate between these different routes. So let's go and add a couple of router links in there and see if that all works. I'm guessing it will, but let's give it a try anyway. So let's go over here to our header.view. And then I'm just going to paste in some router links to / and /about. And let's see, get rid of the flex grow there and then save. All right, looks good. So could use a little bit of margin there. So let me go and just add a little margin on the right. All right, and so we can do home and about and switch between these routes. Nice, view router. It's so easy. And it's really nice coming from the React background that, you know, Vuex and view router, these are really standards. I mean, over on the React side of the house, there's always, you know, which state manager, which router. It's always a big thing. Nice that Vue is actually kind of normalized around that. Okay, so one more thing I want to talk about when it comes to basically the Vue stuff is async loading, because you might want to hold off on loading your Micro-FEs until some event happens. So how's that happening? So let's go over into our app.view over in our host app. And so we're currently synchronously, effectively, loading the header. So I want to asynchronously load it. So I'm going to bring in define async component. And I'm just going to do const header equals, and then use that define async component. And then just do the same exact remote header import. And let's try that. And there you go. Just like that. So easy. And so in the case where this is not actually in the view yet, then it will not load it, which is just really nice. And there's some extra options on here. You can have like a loading component, an error component. This is just, I gotta say, in comparison to the React version of this is actually really nice. Okay, so speaking of React, seems like a good time to go over into our packages directory and create ourselves a React app and then consume that header. So I'm going to go and again use my npx create mf app, and we'll call this one React host, and I'll put it on 8082 in this case, and I'm going to use React for that. JavaScript, and again Tailwind. Cool. And then I'll go back up to the top level and I'll do yarn, so I can bring in React and get that app all set up. And then I'll do yarn start, and we'll just see what it looks like. Okay, it looks like we've got our host app running and our remote app running, and we got our React host. Awesome. So now we want to put our Vue header on the top of this React host. So how are we going to do that? Because if we have a Vue component, React's not going to know how to render that, right? So we basically have to have something on the remote side that's going to take an element and then essentially mount the Vue app on that element, right? So I'll just use a function for that. So let's go over to our remote app again. And I'm going to create a new file in here based on this bootloader. So I'm going to just copy and paste that into a new file. And I'll call this one place header.js and paste it in there. And we're not going to want to place the app, we're going to want to place the header. So I'm going to change that to header. And I don't need the CSS. But what I do need to do is export a default function. And I'll call this one place header. And I'll just create app with that header and mount it on whatever element I get sent. I'll paste that in there. And I think this should do. Let's go and look over to Webpack config and then add on place header and point it at that place header.js. And this is really important, right? You can go and expose any kind of JavaScript from here. It doesn't need to be a component. It can be literally any kind of thing that is compiled into JavaScript. That can be JSON, that can be JavaScript or TypeScript, whatever you want. And now one more thing before I restart the apps. So I'm going to go over here to our host and I'm going to steal this remote because really the React host also needs that. So I'm going to go over into its Webpack config and then paste it in here into the remotes. And now it's ready to essentially receive place header. So let's go over to our terminal, do yarn start. And now let's go take a look at our React app. And now I can see that this is a very simple JSX. So I'm just going to go and kind of turn this into a curly brace function and return that. And then the first thing I need to do is have a spot for the header. So I'm going to create a div here. And I'm going to say we have a ref, and we're going to call this the header ref. And of course, I don't have that yet. So I need to import from React. Also use ref. And then I'm going to create that header ref using use ref. And let's see that it still works. Yeah, haven't broken anything yet. That's cool. And so now that I got the header ref, I need to import place header from remote place header. I'm going to save that out. Still no blowups. That's great. And so let's try it out. Let's use a use effect because I only want this to be run once. So I'll create a use effect where we have a callback function. And in there, it's got an empty dependency array, which means it's only ever going to get run once. And when it gets run, I'm going to do that place header. And now that we've got a reference to that element, which is stored in current, I'm going to go and send that off to our place header. I'm going to save there. And wouldn't you know it? Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. You got yourself a header. Of course, it's not really going to work with the whole home and about thing because you don't really have a view context with all of that. But you can see the potential here of being able to pretty easily integrate Vue components into a React app. Of course, if you're really serious about this, what you should look at is a system called Single SPA. And what Single SPA allows you to do is wrap up components built in a number of different Vue frameworks, which includes React and Vue. And then you kind of bring them together into this parcel. The parcel has a way of managing props and events, which is standardized kind of across all of these different Vue frameworks. Once it's parceled, you can then bring it into this, well, React app in this case, and you have a client copy of Single SPA. You say, hey, cool, this is my parcel that has this header in it. And it's a more formal way of bringing in that header. And again, you can set props, you can register events. So if you're really serious about this sort of multi-framework thing, I really recommend looking at Single SPA. Now, one thing I did want to talk about was some confusion between micro front ends and module federation. I myself have been part of making that confusion. So micro front ends are really just a way of breaking down a UI into smaller parts and pieces. So you have normally the granularity of applications are kind of at the URL level or the route level, the same way that a microservice architecture is breaking up a monolithic API, micro front ends are breaking up monolithic pages. And so that's really the key aspect of a micro front end, is that you have these small units of UI that maintain their own state, that make their own API calls, that have their own business logic and can be maintained by different teams and deployed essentially independently. Now, that being said, you can do that through a monorepo and have those be build time dependencies. You can also use a system like Module Federation here and have them be runtime dependencies. And really, you should think about that in terms of your business requirements. In some cases, it's probably easier and better to use a build time dependency. You get things like easy type checking, you get a coherent, complete app that you're then deploying, where in the case of a runtime dependency, the app isn't complete until it brings in these external components. And those external components could change and cause issues and bugs in the context of the app within which they are consumed. And so there is some inherent risk when it comes to these runtime dependencies that you don't pick up when you have a build time dependency. Of course, you have the upside of when you change, for example, in this case, the header, in one place, it changes in every place simultaneously. So there's some value there as well. All right, well, I hope this gets you excited about the potential of micro front ends in Vue and using module federation for that, or using monorepo systems like NX or Bit or Turbo Repo. Of course, I would love to hear from you in the comments section down below, any comments or questions that you have. Of course, in the meantime, if you like this video, hit that like button. And if you really like the video, hit the subscribe button and click on that bell. You'll be notified the next time a new Blue Collar Coder comes out.